I won't have very much time after posting this. I don't care. Even if they do decide to take care of me, that would actually be better than being bounced around from prison to prison as an off-the-books prisoner. Or worse, be housed in one of those off-record, offshore facilities where I'm sure that I would pass away from old age. I'm not one for overly dramatic exposition, so let's get on with it. I've worked with the company for the past 30 years, since the end of Desert Storm where I was admitted as an intern out of MIT. I worked under a company subcontracted by the NSA during the second year of my undergraduate degree, and I continued with them after the internship as a freelance technician, up until I achieved my master's and later my PhD in programming. In short, they've basically been with me every step of my adult life and education. I feel uncomfortable describing myself as being gifted. I like to describe myself as having a certain affinity for mathematics, reasoning, and problem solving, which earned me a top position as a computer analyst for the CIA at the age of 35. And despite being relatively young, I understood how serious and important my job was. I had 3 identification badges, the codes for which changed twice daily, on entrance and exit of the facility that I worked at in the Northeast. I was also required to sign several memorandums of understanding, privacy contracts, and other documents which would make me an automatic enemy of the state if I so much as violated any of them. My personal computer and laptop at home were also subject to random examination without warrant. In essence, short of the routine colonoscopy, the CIA kept a close tab on almost every aspect of my life, from tracing the cell phone calls of suspected terror cells on American soil, to which was the latest adult film video that I watched. Alas, I digress. I had done my job very well for almost 3 decades, and I was rewarded handsomely for it. The job wasn't necessarily difficult, but it did demand a lot of my time and attention, as I was basically on call 24 hours a day. Before I was attached to the CIA's Department of Domestic Threats, which means that I along with others were responsible for monitoring the ICT trails of individuals and groups being monitored by the government for various reasons. In essence, it involves taking a peek into the social media accounts of the hundreds of millions of people that are logged in at any given time. Yes, the conspiracies do have some truth in them. Take heed before you too are zucked. The really strange stuff happened almost a year ago. I was assigned to look into the digital trail of a group of individuals who were suspected belonged to an anonymous whistleblower group intent on revealing top-secret government information. In the past, we had had threats from whistleblower organizations to release information or intelligence, but none came as close as this particular threat. The group which we tracked down to a brownstone apartment in Manhattan had successfully made it past the various levels of security and were on the verge of accessing the database when we were able to shut it down. 3 of the 5 members were detained to my knowing. What happened to them after that, I never found out. After all, I'm just the computer guy. One of the curious things about this particular incident was where the group wanted to access the information. It wasn't at the CIA headquarters in Langley, Virginia, which is often the target of repeated hacking attempts. Instead, the IP address for the target seemed to be traced to an off-the-books facility somewhere in the Southwest. I didn't have the time or the luxury to think about it at that time, but after a few weeks when I had a very rare moment with no assignments to supervise or paperwork to file, I decided to do some digging of my own to find out more about it. I wasn't particularly interested. Maybe the group were looking for something specific, but it was strange they would take such a risk to go after something that could have been more easily accessed at the company's Virginia office. What piqued my interest even more was the existence of this off-the-books facility. I watched the movies about secret government buildings and even heard rumors from some of my coworkers about such places, but I had always dismissed it as gossip. I did the necessary concealments to avoid being traced by the office security measures. Despite being stringent and almost all-seeing, it had its flaws just like every other security system. Small flaws, but if you knew where and when to look, you could turn the book wide open on files, records, field reports, anything that you could dream of. Before long, I saw the facility was located in Elgin, Texas, quite literally in the middle of nowhere, and no clearly discernible roads or highways near it, at least based on the satellite photos that I saw. Satellites, sheesh. I only had a window of 5 minutes, but based on what I gathered, it appeared to be only one building, just about the regular dimensions of your typical office building. Hell, if I didn't know any better, I would have thought the CIA servers made a mistake and were showing me the top of a poultry feed manufacturer or tractor repair shop. But no, this was the real deal. Not as exciting as Area 51, but what I saw implied that it was one of the several links in the information vessels of the CIA. An internal circuit designed to withstand digital attacks from enemies, with Langley being a red herring. I quickly closed the tabs and windows that got me to that area of the company database, and I restarted my computer. I did it just in time because no more than 2 minutes later, two of the floor supervisors, let's call them Mr. Black and Mr. White, were seen prowling about the cubicles on my end of the floor for no good reason. I don't consider myself a very paranoid person, and despite being exposed to the clandestine, the cloak and dagger things like the CIA does on an almost hourly basis. I also don't consider myself to be a conspiracy theorist, but I knew they were down here looking to get an idea of who had accessed that part of the department's files. Going from cubicle to cubicle, looking over the shoulders of the staff to see what was on their screens, I knew they were looking for me, but I was just fast enough. I also knew that just because I wasn't found this time, it didn't mean that I had the green light to be careless. Over the next few months, I began using an internet cafe, one city over, to access information. Despite my loyalty to the agency, and the fear of what would happen to me if I was caught, human curiosity won out and it got the better of me. Using some technology, I bartered from an old friend from MIT. I was able to access data from the Texas facility for 30 minutes once a week. I was able to see a lot of information. Everything from the US black bag operations in various parts of the globe, to secrets on global leaders as well as local politicians, who were being monitored for treason and even blackmailed for things much worse. I heard that the CIA had a surprisingly close affiliation, not only with other international intelligence agencies but also with several organizations. Well, agencies you just wouldn't normally expect. Namely the Vatican. There was a lot of files and information being shared in relation to certain priests who were working with the CIA, focusing in on regime destabilization efforts in certain regions, namely Eastern Europe, the Middle East, East Africa, and Latin America. But the sharing of information didn't end there. The CIA was also very much interested in recording and transcribing the works of certain priests who served as exorcists and their findings in certain cases of supposed possessions. Was the CIA interested in fighting boogeymen? I don't know. Based on the large compilation of data that I saw, it definitely seemed like they were interested in something. Along with the role of various social media operators in assisting the agency with data and information, I also learned about the deaths and assassinations of certain high-profile people. Over the next few months, my prowling on the Texas facility gradually got less and less. I considered myself an expert on the actual goings on the global geopolitical scene, and I would only watch the news to get a good hearty laugh at how poorly informed the anchors and experts were on panel discussions. That was up until a few weeks ago when I saw something that piqued my interest yet again. On the web layout of the Texas facility, I saw an icon that I hadn't noticed before at the very bottom of the screen. It was in light brown, almost beige text that matched with the background. If you weren't scanning every inch of the screen, you would have missed it. The text on the icon read, "Terrify." I right-clicked on it, turned on my invisible cloak, and I went off. The icon bounced me off of several servers throughout the world as expected, and I had several pop-ups describing the consequences of unauthorized viewing. I had no idea what it was. At first, I thought it would have been a tracking monitor of various secret installations, like the Texas facility, but I was wrong. Dead wrong. At first, it seemed like a normal Google Earth search. Nothing special or outstanding about it. I was able to see the roof of the Texas facility again, along with various other places. Nothing really spooky or weird jumped out at me, but that was before I began noticing the numbers and data that appeared at the sides and corners of the screen. If you're not familiar with how Google Earth works, in essence, you get rudimentary information on the location, coordinates, distances, and areas along with other data on various regions that you're looking at. It was in essence the same with this particular software, but the numbers seemed wrong. It placed the area of certain places much smaller than they really ought to have been. I looked at various areas like Pasadena, Miramar, Florida, Mississippi. All of them had grossly incorrect data. How is it possible that all these places were so incorrectly labeled and calculated? Was it a problem with the algorithm? Or was it just an elaborate prank at my expense? I wasn't convinced at either of these, so I decided to zoom out of the US and do some calculations of my own. When I caught something at the corner of the screen that looked strange. There appeared to be ice caps to the west, where there shouldn't be, and that's when things got weird. I tried rotating the image of the screen using the cursor and it did not turn. This wasn't a map, it was the globe, but that was impossible. I tried scrolling back and forward to make sense of what I was seeing, but nothing seemed to make any sense. I was confused and a little bit nervous at this point. By now, 20 minutes had already passed and I had 10 more left before the cloaking signal would begin to get unreliable. I zoomed back out again, thinking that it was an algorithm, as I was once again bounced around as the screen buffered. What came back on did not relieve me. It shook me. What I saw was the place that we had been living our entire lives. I saw the Earth. The real Earth. Hundreds of thousands, if not millions of globe-like spheres attached by what I could only describe as tethers to a massive central sphere. As far as the eye could see, I saw no stars, no sun, no moon, or any celestial objects. I felt my eyes water and my mouth open. "Get a freaking room, pal," the man next to me said disgustingly as he got up from his cubicle in the internet cafe. In hindsight, he probably saw my expression and he thought that I was looking at some bad stuff. I couldn't begin to form rational thoughts in my mind, much less words to respond to him. What I was seeing, was it real? Was this really where we lived? Our Earth or sphere was located somewhere to the northeast of the mother globe. Well, what I call it. What were these other spheres? What lived there? How could this have been kept a secret? I began to think of the ramifications of such a conspiracy, and I reasoned quite simply that in order for it to be held over the course of centuries, quite literally everybody would have to have been in on it. My stomach turned as I thought of our minuteness in this ocean of life. The Earth was indeed spherical, but in what way? It was gargantuan, and we and everybody we knew and would ever know occupied less than 1/16 of the total area. I was about to close off the window on the device when it happened. The view of our globe shifted from our sphere and rapidly zoomed into another, a not too distant globe. I tried to zoom back out, but I couldn't. The signal was being accessed from another point and my commands weren't being responded to. At first, I thought that I had been made and the CIA was trying to locate me, so I hurriedly turned off the device. But just before the screen cut to Windows Blue, I saw them. These things. They looked like nothing I could describe. And that's when I knew I was accessing a camera feed from another one of those globes. When I was in college, I made up credits by doing an elective on plant biology. In one of my textbooks, I remember seeing a bright yellow fungi. I think they're called lichen, and that's the closest I can describe them as. Sentient fungi that move and shook and vibrated the way that no living thing should look like. They emitted colors I can now only see in my dreams, and the after image of these colors have a silhouette of something that makes me shake and my eyes water just to think of it. I got up from that cubicle and I ran, just before the device shut off. I ran back to my apartment, I packed my things and I left. I'm in the South now, with nothing but the clothes I have in a knapsack and a list of regrets. They'll be coming for me soon. I'll be labeled as homeless, or deranged, struggling with depression. Either that or they'll make me disappear. Either way, I know too much and I regret knowing too much. All the mathematics and logic in the world can't help me now. I was such a fool to think that we could handle what was out there. In my final hours, I can only think and reflect on the human mind. How beautifully simple. How I miss being ignorant.